The 1980s were a decade when imagination escaped gravity. Machines dreamed, humans feared their own creations, and cinema gave birth to worlds that still feel ahead of our time. But how did these films survive decades of imitation and still feel alive today? From dystopian nightmares to cosmic adventures, this is a countdown through the 13 greatest sci-fi films of the 1980s that never lost their power to amaze. Number 13. The Abyss, 1989. When James Cameron released The Abyss, audiences did not know what to expect. Coming after his success with Aliens, the film dove not into outer space, but into the depths of the ocean. It followed a team of underwater drillers who encounter a glowing alien species at the bottom of the sea. What began as a rescue mission turned into a philosophical reflection on human fear and compassion. The Abyss was legendary for its chaotic production. Cameron demanded realism, forcing his actors to film underwater for hours under freezing conditions. Cast members suffered panic attacks. Crews walked out. The studio feared Cameron had gone too far. And yet, what emerged was a visual revolution. The film pioneered digital water effects that would later define computer-generated imagery across Hollywood. Critics were divided. Some hailed it as a masterpiece, others saw it as self-indulgent. But in time, The Abyss became known as one of the most visionary works of the decade. Its themes of alien intelligence and human empathy echoed through later films like Contact and Arrival. It remains a rare sci-fi film that replaced fear of the unknown with wonder. Decades later, its ending still glows with quiet hope at the bottom of the cinematic ocean. Number 12. Robocop, 1987. Robocop exploded into theaters like a bullet-riddled prophecy. Paul Verhoeven's brutal satire of American corporate greed and law enforcement excess shocked audiences who expected a simple robot action movie. Instead, they got a modern Frankenstein myth set in a decaying Detroit where capitalism had fused with crime. The story followed Officer Alex Murphy, who is murdered by gangsters and resurrected as a cyborg law enforcer. What begins as revenge slowly becomes a tragedy of identity. Beneath the armor, Murphy struggles to remember his human soul. The film's violence was so extreme that it initially received an X rating, forcing multiple edits before release. Religious groups protested its depiction of crucifixion imagery. Studios panicked, yet audiences could not look away. Robocop's production was equally intense. The suit weighed nearly 50 pounds, and actor Peter Weller endured hours of physical exhaustion. But that suffering translated into a performance that felt mechanical, yet heartbreakingly human. Over time, critics began calling it one of the smartest films of the decade. Its commentary on privatization, media manipulation, and police brutality has only grown more relevant. Today, Robocop stands as a grim warning disguised as pulp fiction. It asked one chilling question that still haunts us. When technology owns the body, who owns the soul? Number 11. The Thing, 1982. When The Thing premiered in the summer of 1982, it was destroyed by critics. Audiences who adored E.T. were not ready for John Carpenter's vision of cosmic horror and paranoia. Yet decades later, it is hailed as one of the greatest science fiction horror films ever made. The film took place in a frozen Antarctic outpost where a group of researchers discover an alien organism that imitates any living being it infects. As suspicion spreads among the men, trust collapses. The monster is terrifying, but the real horror is human doubt. Carpenter's use of claustrophobic tension and Rob Bottin's practical effects redefined what was possible without computers. The transformations were grotesque, yet hypnotically beautiful. The controversy came fast. Reviewers called it sick and nihilistic. Carpenter's career nearly collapsed, but the film refused to die. As videotape culture rose in the late 80s, The Thing found a second life. Viewers began to see its brilliance, the psychological warfare disguised as gore, the moral question of survival at any cost. Today, The Thing is not just a cult classic. It is a mirror of our modern paranoia. Isolation, fear of infection, mistrust. Every frame feels prophetic. And in that frozen wasteland, Carpenter found the perfect metaphor for humanity itself, fragile, paranoid, and always ready to turn on its own reflection. Number 10. The Terminator, 1984. When The Terminator first arrived, it looked like a low-budget action flick, from an unknown director named James Cameron. But what unspooled on screen was a revelation, a relentless cyborg assassin from the future sent back in time to kill the mother of humanity's savior. The premise was simple, but the execution was revolutionary. The film fused horror pacing with science fiction prophecy, creating a new cinematic language of tension and destiny. Arnold Schwarzenegger's portrayal of the Terminator was cold, mechanical, and terrifyingly iconic. Every line, every movement carried weight. The film's low budget forced creativity. Cameron used guerrilla filmmaking tactics, shooting in alleys and abandoned buildings to craft a grim vision of Los Angeles swallowed by neon and despair. The result felt raw, real, and strangely believable. Upon release, the violence and dark tone unsettled some critics. The idea of machines rising against their creators felt too close to home in an age of growing computerization and Cold War paranoia, yet audiences embraced it. The Terminator became a sleeper hit, transforming Cameron into Hollywood's newest visionary. Its success spawned sequels, but none captured the raw hunger of the original. Decades later, the Terminator remains a haunting reminder of how progress can destroy its own makers. The line, "The future is not set," still feels like both a warning and a prayer. Number 9. Blade Runner, 1982. Blade Runner was born in chaos. Ridley Scott's adaptation of Philip K. Dick's novel was a studio nightmare plagued by creative disputes and production conflicts. But out of that turmoil emerged one of the most visually stunning and philosophically deep films of the century. When it premiered, many critics dismissed it as slow and confusing, but time turned it into legend. Set in a decaying Los Angeles in 2019, the film followed Detective Rick Deckard hunting rogue androids known as replicants. It was a noir mystery bathed in rain, neon, and melancholy. Every frame looked like a dream half remembered. The film questioned what it meant to be human, and whether memories made us real or just mechanical echoes. Harrison Ford's detached performance and Rutger Hauer's haunting monologue at the end became immortal cinematic poetry. Behind the scenes, the production was brutal. The studio forced multiple endings. Scott clashed with actors. Exhaustion plagued the crew, yet every difficulty added texture to the film's grim world. When the director's cut was released years later, it redefined the film's reputation. Blade Runner is now regarded as a cornerstone of modern sci-fi. Its influence shaped everything from The Matrix to Cyberpunk 2077. It remains a dream drenched in light rain and loneliness, a film that did not predict the future. It became it. Number 8. Aliens, 1986. After the original Alien stunned audiences in 1979, few believed a sequel could match its terror. James Cameron did not just match it, he detonated it. Aliens was not a haunted house horror. It was a full-scale war film drenched in adrenaline and maternal rage. Ripley's return to face the creatures that destroyed her crew became one of the most powerful portrayals of female strength ever captured on film. The film followed Ripley as she joined a squad of colonial marines sent to investigate a lost colony. What they found was not survival. It was extermination. The xenomorphs returned in swarms, turning the film into a claustrophobic nightmare of metal corridors and flickering lights. The Queen Alien, a practical effects marvel, became a cinematic icon of terror. Production was a battlefield. Cameron clashed with the British crew over his relentless pace. Sigourney Weaver nearly quit. Studio executives doubted the vision. But the final result silenced everyone. Critics hailed it as one of the greatest sequels ever made. Its mix of character emotion and unrelenting action changed how Hollywood viewed science fiction. Today, Aliens remains a masterclass in tension and heart. Beneath the gunfire, it whispered one truth: the strongest weapon is not technology, but human will. Number 7. Back to the Future, 1985. When Back to the Future hit theaters, it did not just entertain audiences, rewired the culture of the 1980s. Directed by Robert Zemeckis and produced by Steven Spielberg, the film fused science fiction heart and humor into one lightning-charged adventure that never grows old. It was not just about time travel. It was about regret, family legacy, and the idea that even the smallest choice can alter destiny. The story followed teenager Marty McFly, who accidentally travels from 1985 to 1955 in a modified DeLorean built by eccentric inventor Doc Brown. Stranded in the past, Marty must ensure his parents fall in love or risk erasing himself from existence. It was a simple but ingenious setup that mixed science with soul. The film balanced laughter with dread as Marty realized the paradox of playing God with his own timeline. Behind the scenes, the production nearly collapsed. Michael J. Fox was not the original star. Eric Stoltz was first cast as Marty, but after weeks of filming, Zemeckis replaced him, fearing Stoltz lacked the comedic spark. Fox then shot the movie while filming his sitcom Family Ties, sleeping only a few hours each night. That chaotic schedule helped forge the film's frantic energy. Universal Pictures hesitated over the title and almost renamed it Spaceman from Pluto, fearing audiences would not understand it was a comedy. Spielberg famously mocked the suggestion, saving the original name. When the film finally premiered, it became a global phenomenon, grossing hundreds of millions and cementing itself as one of the most beloved sci-fi adventures ever made. Back to the Future is timeless because it captures the wonder of youth, the pain of consequence, and the thrill of rewriting fate. Decades later, its message still burns bright. The past may shape us, but the future is still ours to change. Number 6. The Fly, 1986. David Cronenberg's The Fly crawled out of the shadows as a grotesque masterpiece of transformation. It was a remake of a 1958 film, but Cronenberg reimagined it for a modern audience obsessed with science, technology, and decay. The film blurred the line between genius and monstrosity, and it remains one of the most emotionally devastating sci-fi films ever made. Jeff Goldblum starred as scientist Seth Brundle, who invents a teleportation device that accidentally fuses his DNA with that of a housefly. What begins as a miracle of science soon mutates into a tragedy of the flesh. As Brundle's body deteriorates, his mind remains painfully aware of his own extinction. The film was horrifying not just for its makeup effects, but for its philosophical weight. It explored how ambition and obsession can consume a man faster than any disease. The production was grueling. The makeup process took up to 5 hours each day, with layers of prosthetics and animatronics transforming Goldblum into something both pitiful and monstrous. Studio executives were nervous. The gore was extreme, and test audiences fainted, yet Cronenberg refused to tone it down. He saw beauty in horror and humanity in mutation. Critics were stunned. The film won an Academy Award for Best Makeup and became a defining work of body horror. But at its core, The Fly was a love story. Gina Davis's performance as Veronica captured the heartbreak of watching someone she loved disintegrate in front of her. The film ends not with victory, but mercy, a mercy that left audiences silent. Cronenberg's film endures because it is not about monsters. It is about mortality. It whispers that inside every triumph of science hides the shadow of ruin. Number 5. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, 1982. Few sequels have resurrected a franchise the way The Wrath of Khan did. After the lukewarm response to Star Trek the Motion Picture, the studio considered ending the series. Then came director Nicholas Meyer, who injected heart, philosophy, and revenge into the void. The result was not just a better Star Trek movie, it was one of the greatest science fiction stories ever told. The plot reunited Captain Kirk with an old nemesis Khan, Noonien Singh, played by Ricardo Montalban, whose quiet rage burned hotter than any phaser blast. Driven by vengeance, Khan pursued Kirk across the stars, turning space into an ocean of fury and fate. The film was Shakespeare in a starship, filled with reflections on aging mortality and the weight of command. The dynamic between Kirk and Khan became mythic, a battle not of strength but of intellect. Production faced massive pressure. The budget was slashed, forcing Meyer to repurpose old sets and footage from the first film. Yet, this limitation became its strength. Without the burden of spectacle, Meyer focused on character and story. The emotional climax, the death of Spock, shattered audiences and became one of cinema's most unforgettable moments. Leonard Nimoy initially resisted returning, fearing typecasting, but the script's elegance convinced him. His sacrifice scene, filmed in glass and tears, transformed the franchise from pulp adventure into tragedy. When the film premiered, it was an instant triumph, reviving the Star Trek legacy for generations. Critics praised its maturity and emotional depth. Fans wept, yet left the theaters in awe. The Wrath of Khan proved that science fiction could break hearts as well as minds. It stands as a monument to friendship, sacrifice, and the eternal war between duty and desire. Number 4. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial, 1982. When E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial touched down in 1982, it became more than a movie. It became a memory that never faded. Directed by Steven Spielberg, the film bridged childhood innocence with cosmic wonder, creating one of the most emotional sci-fi experiences ever captured on screen. While other films of the decade looked to the future, E.T. looked inward to the fragile hearts of those who still believed in miracles. The story followed a lonely boy named Elliot, who discovers a stranded alien in his backyard. What begins as curiosity turns into a friendship that transcends species and space itself. Spielberg crafted something deeply human beneath the fantasy. E.T. was not about lasers or battles, but about empathy, the connection between two beings lost in different worlds. The glowing finger, the bicycle flight across the moon, and John Williams' soaring score became symbols of wonder that generations would carry forever. Production was secretive and exhausting. Spielberg shot in chronological order so the young actors could experience the story as it unfolded. The child performances were real, not rehearsed emotions guided by Spielberg's patience. The animatronic puppet that portrayed E.T. was a technical marvel operated by a team who breathed life into every blink and movement. When the studio first screened the film, executives wept openly, something unheard of in that era of cynicism. E.T. became the highest-grossing film of the 1980s and one of the most beloved of all time. Yet some critics accused it of being too sentimental, too pure. Spielberg ignored them. He had created a new myth for modern cinema, one that reminded humanity that love and wonder can exist even in the darkest corners of space. E.T. remains timeless because it whispers the same truth in every language. Home is not a place, it is a feeling. Number 3. The Empire Strikes Back, 1980. Few sequels in history have surpassed their originals, but The Empire Strikes Back did more than that. It redefined what a sequel could be. After the global explosion of Star Wars in 1977, expectations were impossible. Yet when Irvin Kershner's darker, more complex installment premiered, it turned George Lucas's space opera into myth. The story picked up after the victory of the Rebel Alliance, but everything was bleaker, colder, more uncertain. Luke Skywalker sought wisdom from the mysterious Yoda. Han Solo and Princess Leia fled the Empire's grasp. Darth Vader hunted them with relentless precision. And then came one of the greatest revelations in film history. I am your father. It was not just a plot twist, it was a cultural earthquake. The production was chaotic. The Hoth scenes were filmed in freezing Norwegian blizzards. Sets in London flooded. Cast and crew clashed with technical failures daily. Yet Kershner's direction elevated the story to something poetic. He focused on loss, on temptation, and on the loneliness of heroism. The visual effects from industrial light and magic pushed cinema to new frontiers. The lightsaber duels gained emotional gravity. The score from John Williams turned tragedy into symphony. Critics were initially divided, calling it too grim. But audiences understood. This was no children's fantasy. It was a space tragedy for grown souls. Over time, The Empire Strikes Back became the crown jewel of the Star Wars saga. It dared to end on defeat, and yet gave birth to hope. Its legacy is carved not in words, but in feeling. The ache of destiny, the weight of love, and the eternal fight between light and shadow. Number 2. The Road Warrior, 1981. Long before post-apocalyptic films became fashionable, there was The Road Warrior. George Miller's second installment in the Mad Max saga was raw, brutal, and beautiful. It transformed Australian cinema into global legend and turned Mel Gibson into a mythic anti-hero. Where the first film was personal, The Road Warrior became operatic, a ballet of engines, dust, and fire. Set in a sunburned wasteland after civilization's collapse, it followed Max, a haunted loner, who helps a small community defend their fuel from savage marauders. The premise was simple, but Miller's execution was visionary. The film's chase sequences were not just action, they were choreography, carved in steel and gasoline. Every explosion was real, every stunt dangerous. Cars flipped for real bodies, risked everything. It was cinema with skin in the game. The shoot was punishing. Temperatures soared, stunt drivers broke bones. Miller nearly lost his life filming one of the crashes. Hollywood studios called it reckless. Australian critics called it genius. The movie's energy felt primal, its silence more eloquent than dialogue. Max barely spoke, yet his eyes told an entire story of trauma and reluctant redemption. When The Road Warrior hit international theaters, it became a phenomenon. American audiences who barely knew the first film were stunned by its ferocity. Critics hailed it as a masterclass in visual storytelling and realism. Its influence can be seen in everything from video games to modern dystopian films. The Road Warrior did not just depict the end of the world, it made it thrilling and strangely human. It proved that when civilization burns, the fight for kindness becomes the most heroic act of all. Number 1. Akira, 1988. When Akira hit theaters, it didn't arrive quietly. It exploded. Katsuhiro Otomo's animated epic redefined what science fiction could look and feel like. Set in the neon ruins of Neo-Tokyo after a mysterious blast, it followed two friends, Kaneda, a rebellious biker, and Tetsuo, a troubled outcast who gains terrifying psychic powers. Their friendship becomes an apocalypse, tearing the city apart and questioning whether humanity can control the power it creates. Every frame of Akira was hand-drawn, more than 150,000 cells of meticulous motion and chaos. Its detail, flickering signs, speeding bikes, collapsing buildings, was revolutionary. The film's pounding electronic score and six-channel sound engulfed audiences in a sensory storm unlike anything before. Critics called it the Blade Runner of animation, but Akira was fiercer, stranger, and more prophetic. It predicted the obsessions of the next century: technology gone feral, cities choking on their own energy, humans bending nature until it breaks. Decades later, its imagery still feels like a warning carved in neon. From The Matrix to Inception, its influence runs deep. Akira wasn't about the future, it became it. The 1980s gave us more than sci-fi. They gave us visions of our own souls reflected through steel, fire, and light. Each of these films warned us, moved us, and dared us to dream bigger. Which one still haunts your imagination today? Tell us below. And remember, the future belongs to those who keep watching the stars.